Welcome back, everybody, to Flagstone Trail. This is our deep dive review series on the 48 Laws of Power. We're going to be looking at Robert Greene's work and seeing how it applies to navigating the world today.
Yeah, we're going to be taking a journey through history and human psychology, looking at these laws and how they've shaped interactions, from, ancient courts to modern boardrooms.
Definitely. And today, we're tackling Law 1.
Yeah.
Never outshine the master.
Oh, yeah. A big one right out of the gate.
Yeah. What's fascinating is how this law, might sound, on the surface, a bit manipulative, but actually reveals a lot about human nature.
Absolutely.
About ego and insecurity.
For sure. The book kicks off with this case study, Nicolas Fouquet, this high-ranking official in the court of King Louis XIV.
Oh, yeah, I was reading about this. This is a wild one.
Yeah?
He threw this crazy, extravagant party.
Right. Intending to impress the king.
To try to get him good.
Right.
But it backfired spectacularly.
Yeah, spectacularly. He built this unbelievable chateau, Vaux-le-Vicomte, and hosted this insane party, even featured a new play by Molière.
What?
Yeah.
Oh,
It was all intended as this grand display of loyalty and admiration for the king.
Yeah.
Like, look at all this I can do. I'm powerful. I'm great. All this is for you. But it kind of backfired because the sheer magnificence of the chateau, the just insane opulence of the festivities, all of the brilliant guests kind of inadvertently made Louis XIV feel overshadowed.
Oh, yeah, I can see that.
The self-proclaimed Sun King.
Yeah, you're trying to impress the most powerful man in France, but you kind of end up highlighting your own wealth and influence.
Exactly.
Maybe even surpassing his in some ways.
Yeah.
Seems like a recipe for disaster.
And that's what it was. So Louis XIV, known for his just insatiable need for attention and admiration, perceived Fouquet's display as a threat to his own status. He felt insecure.
Right.
He didn't feel flattered. He felt threatened. He saw Fouquet as a rival to be eliminated.
So instead of a promotion, Fouquet got a one-way ticket to prison.
Unfortunately, yes.
Oh, no.
On trumped-up charges of corruption, Fouquet was arrested and spent the next 20 years of his life in solitary confinement.
Wow.
So that's a stark reminder that sometimes, even with the best intentions, failing to understand the psychology of those in power can have some pretty dire consequences.
That's a cautionary tale. But it happened centuries ago in a royal court.
Right.
How does this law apply to us in the modern world?
Right.
Is it really relevant? Like in a workplace, for example?
It is surprisingly relevant.
Yeah.
Imagine you're working on a project, you put in a ton of effort, you come up with this just brilliant solution, you're eager to share your ideas, get some recognition for all your hard work.
Yeah, of course, everyone wants to be acknowledged for their contributions,
Yeah.
especially if they've gone above and beyond.
Absolutely. But the key is to do so without making your boss or supervisor feel threatened or incompetent.
Oh, I see.
If you present your ideas in a way that makes them feel like they've been outshone, it could trigger those insecurities and lead to resentment.
So are you saying we should downplay our accomplishments, hold back on sharing our ideas? That doesn't seem like a recipe for career advancement.
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
It's about being strategic
Yeah.
and understanding these nuances of power dynamics. Remember, most people, even those in positions of authority, they have egos, they have insecurities. So the key is to find ways to make them feel valuable and respected while still showcasing your own talents.
Okay, I'm intrigued. How do you do that in practice?
Okay.
What are some specific strategies for applying Law 1 in a modern workplace?
All right. One technique is to subtly flatter your boss. Now, this doesn't mean being insincere or engaging in outright flattery.
Right.
It's about genuinely acknowledging their strengths, their expertise. So, for instance, when presenting your ideas, you might say something like, I was inspired by your previous advice on this topic, or, I remember you mentioning a similar approach, and I think it's really applicable here.
Okay.
Something like that.
So you're essentially giving them a sense of ownership.
Exactly.
You're making them feel like they're part of the process, even if the idea originated with you.
You're making them feel intelligent and indispensable.
Yeah.
Which can go a long way in building trust and rapport.
Yeah, for sure.
Another effective strategy is to subtly downplay your abilities when appropriate. So, for example, if there's a task you can easily handle yourself, you might consider asking your boss for their input or their guidance.
That seems counterintuitive. Why would you ask for help with something you can do on your own?
Because it makes them feel needed and valued. By seeking their advice, you're acknowledging their experience, their expertise, which can boost their ego and make them more receptive to your ideas in the future.
I see what you mean.
Yeah.
It's like this delicate dance.
It is.
Navigating the ego and the insecurities of those in power while still advancing your own goals. And it's not about being manipulative,
No.
but rather about understanding human psychology
Right.
and using that knowledge to create win-win situations.
Precisely. And Greene provides this fascinating contrast to Fouquet's blunder with the story of Galileo Galilei, who brilliantly navigated the power dynamics of his time to secure his position and advance his groundbreaking work.
Okay, now I'm really interested. We all know Galileo made these significant astronomical discoveries. How did he manage to play the power game so well? Fill me in.
So Galileo was like a master strategist. So when he discovered the 4 moons of Jupiter, he could have dedicated this discovery to various patrons,
Right. Yes.
which was a common practice at the time. However, he chose to focus solely on the Medici family,
Okay.
the powerful rulers of Florence.
Why the Medici specifically? What was his strategy there?
So Galileo
It-
understood the Medici family's symbolism and their just, deep desire to be associated with greatness.
Go ahead.
They had adopted Jupiter, the king of the gods, as their emblem.
Oh, wow.
Right. So Galileo very cleverly linked his discovery of Jupiter's moons to the Medici family.
How did he do that? Did he just dedicate his work to them?
He was much more strategic than that. He presented the discovery as a cosmic reflection of the Medici family's own power and influence, even suggesting that the 4 moons orbiting Jupiter were like, ooh, the 4 Medici brothers orbiting their father, Cosimo.
Wow, that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So instead of making it about his own brilliance, he made it this cosmic celebration of the Medici's power and legacy.
Exactly.
Wow.
And to further solidify this connection, Galileo even presented them with an emblem, showing Jupiter surrounded by the 4 moons, symbolizing the Medici family's cosmic significance.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. What a power move. Did the Medicis buy into it?
Completely. Cosimo II, the reigning Medici at the time, was deeply flattered, appointed Galileo as the official court philosopher and mathematician, providing him with a generous salary and security for life.
Talk about a win-win. Galileo secured his position, was able to continue his work. The Medicis got to bask in the reflected glory of this cosmic discovery. It's amazing how understanding the psychology of power can make all the difference.
Yeah, it's a perfect example of how to effectively apply Law 1. Instead of overshadowing the master, Galileo strategically elevated the master's status.
Yeah.
Right? And in doing so, secured his own success.
This is incredibly insightful. But it still feels a bit like we're talking about historical figures in a completely different world. How can someone listening to this,
Right.
maybe someone working a regular job or navigating their social circles,
Right.
how can they apply these principles?
You'd be surprised how relevant these principles are, even in seemingly ordinary situations. So let's say you're at a social gathering, and you're a naturally funny person. You know people gravitate towards your humor. You find yourself becoming the center of attention.
I can relate to that. It's always nice to make people laugh. Be the life of the party.
Of course, but have you ever noticed that sometimes when you're being the funny one, someone else in the group might start to act a little withdrawn or even try to one-up you with their own jokes?
I have noticed that, yeah.
Yeah.
It can be a little awkward, like they're feeling threatened
Exactly.
by the attention you're getting.
It's a subtle example of Law 1 in action. Even in a casual social setting, people can feel overshadowed if they perceive you as, constantly stealing the show. It might not be intentional on your part, but it's important to be aware of these dynamics.
So how do you navigate that? Should you just tone down your personality to avoid making others feel insecure?
Not necessarily.
That makes-
Remember, it's all about balance and awareness. While it's great to be yourself,
Yeah.
let your natural talents shine. It's also important to be sensitive to the feelings of those around you. So notice the subtle cues. If you sense that someone is feeling overshadowed, find ways to bring them into the conversation, acknowledge their contributions, or even redirect some of the attention their way.
Makes a lot of sense. It's about being mindful of the power dynamics, even in casual social interactions, and finding ways to make others feel comfortable and included.
Exactly. And that's a key takeaway from Law 1. It's not about suppressing your talents or being manipulative. It's about understanding the complexities of human interaction, recognizing the often unspoken rules of social engagement, and using that knowledge to navigate the world more effectively.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into Law 1. It's amazing how a principle that might seem archaic or even manipulative on the surface actually reveals a lot about human nature and the dynamics of power that shape our interactions, whether we're in a boardroom, a social gathering, or even just scrolling through our social media feeds.
It's about understanding that power is all around us. And by understanding its nuances, we can learn to navigate it more effectively and ethically.
It makes you think about all the times you might have unintentionally broken this law without even realizing it. But now that we're aware of it, we can start applying this knowledge to our own lives and hopefully avoid any Fouquet-level blunders.
Absolutely. And as we continue to explore the 48 laws of power, we'll discover how these principles, when applied with wisdom and discretion, can help us understand ourselves and others better, navigate complex situations, and achieve our goals with greater insight and effectiveness.
It's interesting how we often think of power in terms of hierarchy, like a boss and their employees. But what about situations where the power dynamics are a little more subtle or fluid, like in friendships or romantic relationships? Does Law 1 still apply there?
It absolutely does. Power dynamics exist in all types of relationships, even those that seem equal on the surface. Think about it. Have you ever had a friend who always had to be the center of attention? You know, the one who always had to have the best story, the biggest accomplishment.
I think we all know someone like that. It can be a bit draining to be around them constantly.
Exactly. And while they might not be intentionally trying to dominate their relationship, that constant need to outshine can create an imbalance that eventually strains the connection.
So how do you navigate that kind of situation without damaging the friendship? It's not like you can just demote your friend or give them a performance review.
Right, you're right. It's much more nuanced. But the principles of Law 1 can still guide you. It's about recognizing those subtle power dynamics at play and finding ways to create a more balanced and harmonious relationship.
Okay. Can you give me an example?
Yeah.
Let's say my friend is always bragging about their latest achievements, and I'm starting to feel a bit overshadowed. What can I do?
Instead of getting into this competitive one-upmanship game, try shifting the focus to celebrating their accomplishments genuinely. Express sincere admiration for their achievements, but also subtly redirect the conversation to other topics or highlight the successes of others in the group.
So you're not denying their success or trying to diminish their accomplishments. You're just subtly shifting the dynamic away from that constant self-promotion.
Exactly. It's about finding a balance between acknowledging their accomplishments, but creating a space for others to shine as well. You can also try subtly shifting the focus to shared experiences or interests, things you both enjoy that you can connect on an equal footing.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's about reminding yourselves that the friendship is not a competition. It's a partnership built on mutual respect and appreciation.
Exactly. And remember, sometimes the best way to navigate these situations is to have an open and honest conversation with your friend. You might be surprised how receptive they are to your perspective, especially if you approach the conversation with empathy and a genuine desire to strengthen the relationship.
That's really helpful advice. It makes me think about how Law 1 isn't just about navigating these hierarchical power structures, but also about understanding the more subtle dynamics that exist to all human relationships.
Absolutely. And one of the most fascinating aspects of Law 1 is the psychological component. It's not just about what people do, but about why they do it.
You're talking about the role of ego and insecurity in these power dynamics.
Exactly. Understanding those underlying psychological factors can be incredibly helpful in it. Navigating these situations effectively. For example, the book talks about how those in positions of power, or even those who just crave attention, often have fragile egos that are easily threatened.
But isn't that a bit cynical? To assume that everyone in a position of power is insecure.
Not necessarily. It's more about recognizing that everyone, regardless of their status or achievements, has insecurities. It's part of being human.
Sure.
And when someone feels threatened or insecure, they're more likely to react defensively or even aggressively.
So how do you spot those insecurities?
Yeah.
Are there any telltale signs that someone might be feeling threatened?
There are definitely some common signs to look out for. For instance, someone who is constantly boasting about their accomplishments or putting others down, might be trying to compensate for underlying feelings of inadequacy.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like they're trying to inflate their own ego by diminishing others. What are some other red flags?
Someone who is overly sensitive to criticism or quick to take offense might also be feeling insecure. They might interpret even constructive feedback as a personal attack.
I've definitely worked with people like that. It's like walking on eggshells around them, never knowing what might trigger a negative reaction.
Exactly. And it's important to remember that. These reactions are often rooted in insecurity, not malice. Once you understand that, you can approach these situations with more empathy and find ways to communicate more effectively.
So knowing these signs can help us navigate those tricky situations more effectively and avoid unintentionally triggering someone's insecurities. But let's go back to the workplace for a moment.
Okay.
We've talked about how to subtly flatter your boss, strategically downplay your abilities. But what about situations where you're working with a colleague who's clearly trying to outshine you, maybe even sabotaging your work to make themselves look better?
That's a challenging situation, and it's important to handle it with care. The first step is to try and understand their motivations. Are they feeling insecure about their own position? Are they competing for a promotion? Or are they just naturally competitive, driven to be the best?
So it's like being a detective.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out what's driving their behavior. But once you understand their motivations, what then? How do you address this situation without escalating the conflict?
One approach is to try and build a rapport with them,
Okay.
to find common ground and areas of shared interest. This might seem counterintuitive, but sometimes showing a genuine interest in their work and acknowledging their strengths can help to disarm them.
So instead of seeing them as a rival, you're trying to build a connection, maybe even turn them into an ally.
Exactly. It's about shifting the dynamic from competition to collaboration. Of course, this might not always work, especially if they're deeply insecure or intent on sabotaging your efforts.
What do you do in those situations?
If you've tried to build rapport and it's not working, you might need to take a more assertive approach.
Okay.
This could involve documenting their behavior, bringing it to the attention of your supervisor, or even setting clear boundaries.
That sounds like it could get messy, especially if the colleague is good at playing the political game.
It can be tricky, but it's important to stand up for yourself and protect your own interests. Remember, Law 1 is not about being a doormat. It's about understanding power dynamics and using that knowledge to navigate complex situations effectively.
This has been incredibly insightful. I'm starting to see how Law 1 is more than just a set of rules for getting ahead.
Right.
It's a framework for understanding human behavior and the dynamics of power that shape our interactions from the boardroom to our personal relationship.
Absolutely. And one of the things that Greene talks about that's so fascinating is that, power is a complex and often subtle force that's always at play. And by understanding its nuances, we can learn to navigate it with more wisdom, grace, and effectiveness.
This makes me think about social media.
Oh, yeah.
Which is like a modern-day court.
It is.
Where everyone's vying for
Attention
and influence.
Yeah.
Does Law 1 apply there as well?
It definitely does. Social media is a fascinating example of how these ancient principles of power dynamics play out. In the digital age, you see people constantly trying to project this image of success, happiness, and perfection, often trying to outshine each other with carefully curated posts and updates.
It's like this never-ending highlight reel where everyone is showcasing their best selves, or at least the version of themselves they want the world to see.
Exactly. And while there's nothing inherently wrong with sharing your accomplishments or positive experiences, it's important to be mindful of how your online presence might be perceived by others if you're constantly boasting about your achievements or showcasing this seemingly perfect life. You risk triggering envy and resentment in your followers.
Yeah, it's like that saying, comparison is the thief of joy.
Yeah.
When you're constantly bombarded with images of other people's successes, it can be easy to feel inadequate or even envious.
Precisely. And this is where Law 1 comes into play. It's not about hiding your accomplishments or pretending to be something you're not. It's about finding a balance between sharing your authentic self and being sensitive to the feelings of those around you.
So how do you strike that balance?
Yeah.
Are there any specific strategies for applying Law 1 in the context of social media?
One approach is to focus on sharing content that is not only about your own achievements, but also about things that are genuinely interesting or helpful to others. So for instance, instead of just posting about your latest promotion, you could share an article about career advice or tips for professional development.
Okay, so you're adding value to your followers' lives.
Yeah.
Rather than just promoting your own ego.
Exactly. It's about shifting the focus from self-promotion to genuine connection. and contribution. You can also use social media to celebrate the accomplishments of others, share articles about people you admire, congratulate friends on their successes, or simply offer words of encouragement and support to those who are struggling.
That's a great point. It's about using social media as a platform for building each other up rather than tearing each other down.
Exactly.
Creating a more positive and supportive online community.
Exactly. And remember, social media is just this curated snapshot of people's lives. So it's important not to compare your behind the scenes to someone else's.
Yeah.
Highlight reel, right?
That's a good point.
Focus on your own journey, celebrate your own accomplishments, and use social media as a tool for connection and inspiration, not competition.
It's a great reminder that even in the digital age, the principles of Law 1 are still relevant. It's about understanding the dynamics of power, navigating the complexities of human interaction, and using that knowledge to create more fulfilling and harmonious relationships, both online and offline.
And as we've seen, these principles can be applied in college, a wide range of situations, from navigating workplace politics to building stronger friendships to even curating our online presence in a way that is both authentic and mindful of others.
It makes you think about how these seemingly ancient principles are still so relevant in our modern lives.
Absolutely. It highlights the timeless nature of human psychology and the dynamics of power that have shaped our interactions for centuries.
Before we wrap up our discussion of Law 1,
is
there anything else you'd like to add about this principle, especially for our listeners who are trying to apply these ideas to their own lives?
I think one of the most important takeaways is that Law 1 is not about being manipulative or cunning. It's about understanding those subtle dynamics of power that exist in all human interactions and using that knowledge to navigate those situations effectively and ethically.
Yeah, that's a key point. It's about using this knowledge for good, not for personal gain at the expense of others.
Exactly. It's about building genuine connections, fostering trust, and creating win-win situations where everyone feels valued and respected.
This has been a fascinating deep dive into Law 1. I feel like we've just scratched the surface, but I'm already starting to see the world in a new light.
And that's the beauty of Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. It's a journey of self-discovery and a guide to understanding the complexities of human nature and the dynamics of power that shape our world.
It's amazing how much we've unpacked just from this first law. It makes you wonder, is there ever a time when it is okay to outshine the master?
That's a great question, and it gets to the heart of what makes Law 1 so nuanced. There are definitely situations where what appears to be outshining is actually a form of strategic service. The key is discerning when your brilliance truly benefits the master rather than threatening them.
Okay. Give me an example. When would that kind of calculated risk be worth taking?
So imagine you're working on a team project and your manager is struggling to come up with a solution. You have this brilliant idea that you know could save the project, but you're hesitant to share it because you don't want to make your manager look bad.
Yeah, that's a tough spot. On one hand, you want to be a team player, help the project succeed. But on the other hand, you don't want to step on anyone's toes.
Exactly. But in this scenario, you can actually leverage Law 1 to your advantage by framing your brilliance as a solution that supports your manager's leadership.
How would you do that?
Instead of presenting your idea as a complete solution, you could frame it as a suggestion or a building block that builds upon your manager's existing ideas. You might say something like, I was thinking about your approach and I had an idea that might complement it.
I see. So you're not taking ownership of the entire solution, but you're Git, subtly guiding your manager towards a more successful outcome.
Precisely. You're leveraging your brilliance to make your manager look good, which in turn reflects positively on you as a valuable team player. And in the process, you're bend, potentially saving the project and advancing your own career.
It's like a subtle form of leadership where you're influencing the outcome without necessarily being in the spotlight.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that. True power often lies in the ability to empower others.
This conversation has been incredibly eye-opening. It's made me realize that Law 1 is not just about avoiding negative consequences, but also about using our understanding of power dynamics to achieve positive outcomes, both for ourselves and those around us.
And that's the beauty of Robert Greene's 48 Laws of Power. It's not a manual for manipulation, but a framework for understanding human behavior and those often unspoken rules that govern social interactions.
It encourages us to become more observant, more strategic, and ultimately more effective in navigating the complexities of human relationships.
And it reminds us that power, when used wisely, can be a force for good, enabling us to create positive change and build a better world.
Well said. So as we wrap up our deep dive into Law 1, never outshine the master. What's by? The one key takeaway you hope our listeners will remember.
Remember, it's all about understanding that power dynamics exist in every interaction, from casual conversations to high-stakes negotiations. By recognizing these dynamics, we can become more adept at navigating them with grace, intelligence, and ultimately, success.
It's a call to become more aware, more strategic, and more mindful of how our actions and words impact those around us.
Exactly. And with that awareness comes the power to build stronger relationships, achieve our goals, and make a positive impact on the world.
And that's it for today's Flagstone Trail discussion. We appreciate your listenership.